Hello everyone and welcome back to Flying Through the Helicopter Flying Handbook. This video is about Chapter 5, which is all about the Rotorcraft Flight Manual. The Rotorcraft Flight Manual is a book that should be in every rotorcraft that tells you what are its limitations, what are the standard procedures and such. So a little bit of history there. It used to be that aircraft were produced and there was varying levels of quality documentation that was provided by the manufacturers. So after a little while, people kind of got together and they decided on a standard for these publications. Now for airplanes, before 1996, they had things called a POH, Pilot's Operating Handbook. And that was just kind of a generic book about a specific model. And for airplanes, at least, after 96, you have to have something called an AFM, an Airplane Flight Manual, which is tied to a serial number. For helicopters, of course, everything's a little bit different. We have the Rotorcraft Flight Manual, and sometimes people will refer to that as a POH as well. So as I said, we have standardized sections in this book, and rather than kind of go through the text of this chapter, I thought it would be better if we just instead went through some actual manuals. So this is the manual for the Schweizer 269C-1, which is also known as the S300 CB and the S300 CBi. And the difference between the CB and the CBi is that the CBi is fuel injected. Okay, so we have some preliminaries, and that includes things like the table of contents. And here we have our different sections, which again are standardized. We have the general section, talks about the aircraft. We have limitations. Then we have emergency procedures. Then normal procedures, performance data, weight and balance data. That's actually the subject of the next chapter in the book. Handling and service maintenance. And we might have an additional performance section, and then we have optional supplements. And then there is another optional section 10, which is not in the Schweizer manual. Okay, so I can look through all this preliminary stuff, and that leads me eventually to this page. You'll notice it says FAA approved Rotorcraft Flight Manual for this. So that's your approval. It says, yes, this is the official Schweizer manual. Okay, so let's skip on to section 1. All right. Section 1, General. Here's an index for this section. They're going to describe this helicopter and what's in this section. They also tell you about the type certificate for this helicopter. So you could look up the type certificate 4H12, and that is the type certificate for this helicopter. What you're going to find, of course, if you do look at that, is that type certificate probably describes things back to 1955, because the Schweizer S300 CBi is an evolution of the original TH-55 training helicopter produced in 1955. And they'll tell you, hey, the official model is 269C-1. This is what we call it. And if you're going to file a flight plan, it's an H269. And then they go into describing the helicopter. It has 3 blades, fully articulated, single main rotor system. What's the engine that's installed? You'll notice the later models have an HIO 360. So what does that mean? It's a helicopter version of this engine. It's fuel injected. It's opposed. Most aircraft engines are. 360 cubic inches, and G1A has some additional information about that engine. So the earlier models were not fuel injected. That's why there's no I in their model number. Okay, so they go on to describe what does the aircraft look like, what's it made out of, and all of those kinds of things. So I would definitely recommend, even if you're flying in a sim with a helicopter, a lot of the sim helicopters do come with a kind of mini manual. Go ahead and grab a copy of an actual manual if you can. I was able to download this off of Schweizer's website. Same thing with the Robinson manuals as well. And if we keep going, we'll eventually get to section 2. So section 2 is all about limits. So here we are. Section 2, limitations. And again, there's an index for this section. And this is going to tell me what kind of operations I can perform in this helicopter. Now, it does tell me this helicopter is not approved for IFR, which you might think is strange, but guess what? The Robinsons are also not approved for IFR. So a lot of helicopters are not IFR approved. And let's be honest, you don't do a lot of IFR flying in helicopters anyway. You can, of course, do training in non-approved helicopters. If you're flying at night, you can only fly at night when your lights are working. That's including your landing light, navigation, instrument, and anti-collision light. So if your landing light happens to be burned out, you're not supposed to fly this helicopter. And again, VFR condition. Okay, other limitations. If you solo, right seat only. It's pretty common. Most helicopters have a solo seat. That's for weight and balance reasons. In this model of the Schweizer, the fuel tank is on the opposite side, so it makes sense that the pilot would be on the right if the fuel tank's on the left. And you're not supposed to operate during takeoffs and landings at more than 8,000 feet, density altitude, and en route 10,000 feet. Now, when you take the doors off, your VNE is limited to 90 knots. And they also tell you, hey, if you don't have a seat occupied, you should fasten up the seat belts so they don't flop around and possibly create a hazard with a control that gets locked up or something. And here's a placard that will show you what the limits are, what's your VNE for different weather conditions. When we're flying at Mount Pocono, kind of the standard joke is it's 94 knots. Because if you look, we're at 2,000 feet and it has to get pretty hot. It has to be over 100 before that VNE is going to go down. They also will tell you that you can have at most 600 pounds in the cabin. They'll have more about that in the weight and balance section. Don't store stuff between the seats. Don't smoke. 20 pounds max in the glove box. And then some more limitations. The maximum rotor speed is 504 RPMs. And the minimum is 390 RPMs. That's that inner green arc, if you think back to the TAC from an earlier video. And here's our maximum speed as it changes with density altitude. Maximum weight for this helicopter is 1750, and then they have weight and balance limitations as well. I'm not going to talk about those now because we have an entire chapter on that that's coming up very soon. So what are the limits? Depends on the helicopter that you have and the power plant. It says maximum continuous power is 180 horsepower. And they also tell you what the idle range is. And they give you a warning. Don't exceed the 1600 RPMs when you have disengaged the rotors. And why is that? Well, you can easily overspeed the engine and you can cause damage to the engine because it doesn't really have a load. You're running it full open with nothing to bog it down and sort of smooth it out. If you look at an airplane engine, they have a propeller that kind of acts like a flywheel. And if we don't have the rotors engaged, it's sort of like not having a flywheel on that engine. And there's a warning, if you exceed 2,000 RPMs with the rotor disengaged, look at the drive shaft. Make sure you didn't damage anything. They also talk about the fuel that you're allowed to have and different oils that you can use. It depends if you're going to use multi-viscosity or single viscosity oil. And there's a big debate in the aviation community over which one's better. And if you talk to the people that make the oil, they'll say just pick whatever you want. Okay, fuel systems. If you have the standard one tank, then you're going to have 32.5 gallons of usable fuel. If you have two tanks, you get 64 gallons of usable fuel. Okay, and then they talk about different markings. What is the oil pressure range? What is the oil temperature range? Amps. And they will go through different models of this helicopter. And they're going to have slightly different arrangements for the instruments and slightly different limitations. Now, if you have a carbureted helicopter, there will be a carburetor temperature gauge. And basically what they're going to tell you is keep it out of the yellow arc. So here is the caution arc. And if your carburetor temperature is in that range, you should apply carburetor heat. Here's your tachometer. And again, they're going to describe the different ranges on this tachometer. Okay, that brings us to section 3. Section 3 is about the emergency procedures. They start with, what if your engine fails? Guess what? You're doing an auto rotation. Okay, so if you're above 400 feet, what are you going to do? Down right aft. Lower the collective. Enter normal auto rotation. It doesn't say, down right aft, but basically you're supposed to know that. You lower the collective immediately, and then you put in right pedal, because remember we said power goes in, left pedal, power goes out, right pedal. You enter auto rotation, and 52 knots is the ideal auto rotation speed. What does that mean? It gives you the minimum of a descent. So your descent rate will be approximately 1,500 feet per minute. Now, if you vary from this minimum, it might go as high as, say, 2,000 feet per minute. And that is something that you can do in an auto rotation, more about that later, to try to adjust the point where you're going to touch down. And they say at approximately 50 feet, initiate a flare. So what do? You pull back on the cyclic. You try to arrest your descent and your forward speed. At the same time, this will charge up the rotors. It will cause the rotors to cone, and the RPMs will increase slightly, although not as much in the Schweizer as they would in, say, a Robinson, because the Robinson has a low inertia rotor system. At about 10 feet, you are going to coordinate collective pitch with forward movement of the cyclic. All right, what does that mean? You're going to level the aircraft and start pulling the collective to cushion the blow when you land. And of course, avoid rapid lowering of collective pitch or the use of aft cyclic stick during the initial ground contact or during ground slide. In other words, if you start sliding on the ground, which you very well may do, depending on weather conditions, don't drop the collective. If you do, the helicopter is going to grab the ground and you might have another problem. In the event of engine failure at night, do not turn on the landing light above 1,000 feet in order to preserve battery power. Okay? Not too many people are flying that high anyway, but good to know. And then they have kind of the intermediate. You're above 7 feet and below or 450 feet. Okay, now what if you're below 7 feet? What are you going to do? You're going to apply right pedal. You're not going to touch the collective. And you're going to apply a little bit of right stick so that you don't drift to the left. And then as you get close to the ground, you pull the collective up to cushion the blow. What if you have to ditch and you got the power off? You're going to come down to the water. You're going to lower the collective pitch and put in sideward cyclic after you hit the water. Take off your seatbelts, open the doors, and exit. You might say, why are you going to hit this thing sideways? You want to try to stop the choppy things above you. Now, if you have the power on, what do? You open the doors, you let your passenger out, fly away from them, turn off the switches, and then you pretty much will do something similar. to get yourself out. Okay, what do you do if you get warning lights? And a lot of these manuals, you'll see they'll say things like land immediately or land as soon as practical. So if you get an oil temperature right, land as soon as possible. What if you get a chip? Land as soon as possible. Something you should know, it is not unusual if you have a helicopter where some of the components have just been overhauled, or if it's brand new, they might produce a little bit of metal, and a little metal floats to the chip detector, and now you have a light. Same thing, tail rotor transmission, land as soon as possible. And if the low fuel light comes on, land immediately. Don't mess around. Don't say, hey, is there a close by airport? If you see a piece of ground that looks kind of flat, hopefully that's open so you can approach it easily, get on the ground, because you have 1 gallon of fuel left. Clutch warning light. If you see this light come on during flight, be ready to do an auto. And you want to land as soon as possible. This comes on during your flight. And then that brings you to section 4. Section 4 is on normal procedures. They start with pre-flight, and then they go through, how do you start the engine? How do you engage the rotors? How do you do a practice auto rotation? So this will go through a pre-flight. Now, you are probably going to have some sort of pre-flight checklist that will be used for your helicopter, even if it's in a sim. Most sim helicopters ship with a pre-flight checklist, and people like to customize it for their operations. You're not prevented from doing so. You can use the generic one that's in the manual, or you can customize it yourself. Then we get to section 5, which is about performance. You'll notice that for performance reasons, it says our best rate of climb speed, our VY, is 41 knots. What is our VX, our best angle of climb speed? It's a helicopter. That would be 0. Here we have our height velocity diagram. And it says that, if you're in the shaded region, just be aware that you're at increased risk if you had to enter an auto rotation at that speed and that height. It might be a little difficult to do it well. Also in the HV diagram, you'll see that we have our recommended takeoff profile, which is essentially telling us that you should take off and you should climb out at about 60 knots. And we will have more about the HV diagrams in a future video. Okay, so here's the big one. You have your hover ceiling for different gross weights. So if I go to max gross weight and my outside air temperature is 20, it's a nice winter day. It says that I can do an in-ground effect hover at something a little bit higher than 5,000. If it's 0 and I'm really light, I could do almost 10,000 feet. All right, section 7. Section 7 is all about aircraft handling and maintenance. So they will talk about things such as how do you fuel the helicopter? How much usable fuel does it have? What about the ground handling wheels? What if I have to jump start the helicopter? How do I service different parts? So all of those kinds of things. So they're not directly related to operating the helicopter in flight, but they are important things to know. So I'm not going to iterate over all of these either. There is no section 8 for this helicopter. And section 9 talks about optional equipment. So some of the optional equipment we have would include things such as engine overspeed protection, cabin heater, cargo hook, winterization kit, amphibious floats. And if we have those options installed, we should have pages for that. Okay, so that is the Rotorcraft Flying Handbook for the Schweizer.